Everyone knows the Vikings are trying to trade up, but who is the competition? Who should we be worried about? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to my hashtag everydayers, those of you who listen to this show each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much. For everybody else, hello, welcome. My name is Luke. You've come on a great day because it's Twitter Tuesday. That means I'm answering your questions. You can find the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, whether it is any audio listening app, podcast listening app like the SiriusXM app. You can also find this show on YouTube or even on Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On app. Today's show is Twitter Tuesday. That means I'm answering your questions as submitted to me, mostly via Twitter, also via email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com or in the show notes. There is a Google form that you can fill out. It was brought to my attention that some people couldn't message me if they weren't like premium users on Twitter. Did not realize that setting had been changed for everybody. So if you don't want only blue checks to be able to DM you, if you're not following them back, then you got to go into your settings and change that. So my apologies. You can now DM me no matter who you are. But most of you figured out just went to the Google form or whatever. So I got a bunch of questions. First one comes from Neil Prusman, who asked, is there a significant player that Denver, Vegas, or another team could include in their trade offers that might trump what the Vikings have to offer in a trade up in this year's draft? So yeah, but I don't think they will. That's my answer to this. I think the only player that would like truly move the needle here. Now I'm sure, Denver could throw in some whoever, I don't know their roster very intimately, that would, make up for the second round pick they don't have or something like that. But honestly, it's really hard to do that calculus and to make a team in like going deep into a rebuild, which is what a team like New England would kind of be committing to by saying yes to a trade down. It's kind of hard to sell them on like a veteran player that would be the kind of player that gets traded for this, right? That doesn't have, 2-3 years left on their deal. And so for Denver, the only guy I can think of is Pat Surtain. And he's super bolted down in Denver. He's like Justin Jefferson style, like bolted to the ground. He ain't going anywhere. They're going to extend him. Outside of Surtain, I don't really see anybody there. I don't know who. I mean, you could do like Max Crosby or something, but like those players are either cost money or are going to cost money soon. So those costs are different and they don't really like get you the progress that you hope you would get if you just like had the draft picks that all come with 4-year, cost controlled deals. That's like why draft picks are valuable when compared to those guys. It's why, veteran players go for 6th round picks all the time. Sketch Conk asks, do you think there's any chance that the Vikings put players in their trade package to get up to QB? Kind of the same issue. So I don't, any chance, like sure in the like philosophical way of we don't know what we don't know, but I don't think it happens. I mean, every other fan base is going to be like, what about Justin Jefferson in 11 and 23 for our pick? That's not happening. Kevin O'Connell has been he's been telling Justin Jefferson here's who your QB is going to be. I don't think that they're entertaining the idea, let alone getting into talks with anybody. And at this point, whatever their plan is, they're way deeper into it than like we would know by now. So I do not think that is the case. If you wanted to talk about, throwing a Caleb Evans in there or something like that, but like how much does somebody like that move the needle? I don't know who else the Vikings have that like would move the needle there. It would have to be somebody like Jordan Addison. But, and I told Mike Debate this in the Locked On Patriots crossover we did last week, the whole idea right now is that the Vikings are really well set up to nurture a quarterback. They've got bookend tackles, they've got pass catchers, they've got, Aaron Jones in this running game that now they can be excited about. Like they are set up to develop a quarterback. So giving up players that are part of that logic sort of undermines the whole idea, right? And if, the logic has to be, well, you can only really draft Drake May if you're set up to nurture him. But if you give away the nurturing and you're still okay with that, then why wouldn't the Patriots, by that same logic, the Patriots should just take him? I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I don't think so, but hey, anything's possible. Vikings Super Bowl champs 2026, love it, asks, I keep hearing that the Vikings shouldn't worry about the Broncos or Raiders because they don't have the same ammunition to trade up, which very much so. So I believe the Raiders have already dropped out. There was a quote from Antonio Pierce that was like, we're going to make sure Aiden O'Connell has a chance to take the job, which to me says, we're not taking one of these guys that's like a bona fide, you drafted him 2 overall, you got to start him day 1 kind of guy. That sounds to me like Vegas is out. And Denver doesn't have a second this year. They are pretty cap strapped, or were pretty cap strapped going in. So they are not exactly as flush with resources as the Vikings are. And they pick behind them. So this is a lot of things working against Denver in the trade. And crucially, the Vikings have 2 first-round picks this year. The Raiders and Broncos have not done similar moves. They could, maybe, if they wanted to find, a way to get 2/3 and a second to get a first. They could try to do something like that, but they haven't. And they probably would have by now if they were really trying to compete. But that was not the question from Vikings Super Bowl champs 2026. He said, what about the Giants? The Giants are harder to nail down. There is, if you just, in the Madden sense of, if I controlled the Giants and I wanted to get rid of Daniel Jones, I would probably try to trade up with Arizona to ensure JJ McCarthy if you were worried about the Vikings jumping you. But we haven't heard anything out of there, which doesn't mean it's not happening, but it certainly doesn't mean that it's happening either. And I do not run the Giants. It's probably good for them. Joe Shane runs the Giants, and Joe Shane has committed to Daniel Jones in a way that, while there were rumblings out of the combine that the Giants are having buyer's remorse with Daniel Jones, there's not a lot you can do about that right now. Be a pretty good time to draft a raw quarterback and see if he develops, but you don't get to start him yet. And by the time you're out from under that Daniel Jones contract, it's going to be 2-3 years from now. So you're not really going to get the benefit of rookie contract cap relief because you're still dealing with another cap thing. So maybe you'll get 1 year of it, right? So this would be a great time if I were the Giants to spend a mid-round, a 3rd round pick on a quarterback. Take a flyer on whoever the hyper athlete of the class is. Maybe that's a great Joe Milton destination because he's got the arm, but he's got so much to learn and he needs so much time. Go ahead and take a shot at it. You got Daniel Jones in the meantime, and maybe you'll even have QB competition over there. But I don't think that they're in the place where they're going to do it. Could they? Should they? Arguable. They certainly could. Should they is arguable, but will they? I feel like the media cycle would have played out differently. I don't know. That's just my tea leaf read on it. Mac says, if we're saying it's worth 3 firsts to trade up for May, wouldn't it also be worth even more to trade up even higher and get their number 1 rated guy if that's not May? Totally. Absolutely. Don't know if that's plausible. Ideally, you go, first overall pick to the Chicago Bears. They're not going to pick up the phone. They're not going to listen to your offer, right? You can't get that. You could go offer them 4 first-round picks all you want. They're just going to keep telling you no, and ultimately that ball's in their court. And it sounds like the Commanders are doing the same thing, even though they kind of said, maybe we are open for business at the Combine, like Dan Quinn said that, or at the owners' meeting, Dan Quinn said that. It sounds like they've picked a guy, and who that guy is obfuscated by the rumor mill and the smokescreen of it all for reasons that advantage a team like the Patriots or even the Vikings or the Giants or whoever. But it seems to me, again, tea leaf reading the best I can, that the Commanders have settled on who their guy is and they're just going to pick him. Jake Nelson asks, can Drake May's drifting in the pocket be used tactically like he used it in college? That is an awesome question. So sort of, yeah, there's a way, I think I get what you're getting at here. But basically, my read on Drake May is that when he wants to move off of his original drop back spot, when he doesn't move off of his original drop back spot, he's lights out, really great quarterback. That's kind of easy mode that a lot of quarterbacks will be at their best when they get to just drop back and throw, right? So what happens when you have to move off of your spot? that is what separates all these guys, right? The way Caleb Williams plays that is different from the way Jaden Daniels plays that, is different from the way JJ McCarthy plays that. And the way for Drake is that he will drift a little bit, but it's not just him kind of bouncing over and drifting. It is sometimes later in his season, it got more under control, which is really encouraging. But he will lose his base. You can actually see it in his pro day. If you go watch his, go to YouTube and search Drake May pro day, you'll see NFL did a cut up of it. You'll see that he abandons his base and he has to reset that base to throw, unless he's going to throw off platform, which is going to be harder. He's really good at it, but that's always going to be harder than throwing off of a base. So does that habit for drifting, can you take advantage of that? And the answer is yeah, sprint outs, rollouts, get him on the run. Get the whole situation moving, because if Drake May is more comfortable throwing while moving, design an offense that throws while moving. That presents some problems for the defense. So you can absolutely just lean into that. I don't know if that's the way I want to live, but that might be the way you live early. And then until you can kind of get things to calm down and get him to be a little bit more comfortable with smaller, more surgical moves in the pocket. I hate to say it, but not unlike JJ McCarthy. This is actually the thing. And I did a whole episode about it a while ago, but I don't have JJ McCarthy above Drake May, but you're hearing maybe teams do, and maybe that's smoke. But if it's not smoke, that would be the reason that JJ McCarthy is a little bit more conservative with his movement in the pocket, and QB coaches are going to like that. Got a bunch more questions here to answer on Twitter Tuesday here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is online therapy made easy, designed to be convenient and flexible and suited to your schedule. It's one of the hardest things when you're trying to get into therapy, if you are, is just making that work, especially, if you work all day and hours can be limited that are available to you. Or maybe you work from home, or maybe you don't live in an area where it's easy to get from one place to another. Maybe you're super out in the boonies or something. All of that, not an issue for BetterHelp. It's entirely online. All you have to do is go to betterhelp.com/lockedon. You can get 10% off of your first month. They'll hook you up with a therapist that they think is right for you. And if you don't like that guy or girl, you can move on and switch for no additional charge. Once again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thanks a million for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. When you're done here, go to Locked On Sports Today. You can get a 24/7 streaming channel, first and only of its kind. All things sports, daily podcasts rotating 24/7. You can have that thing on in the background and forget about it all day long. Moving on here with this Twitter Tuesday episode, the next question comes from K. Scott, who asks, if Penix were never injured but put on the same tape and was otherwise the same QB, where would he be in this year's QB conversations for you? Essentially trying to drive at, how much does the injury sink him? It's not a huge deal for me. It's something. It matters. But it's definitely not the driving thing for me with Penix. The driving thing for me with Penix is missed passes. He just throws bad ones a bunch. He throws good ones a bunch too, but ups and downs are not what you want in quarterback, right? You'll take that with wideouts, but not with quarterback. That's just the nature of those positions. Some positions are you're just more defined by your ups, and then some positions like corner and O-line more defined by their downs. Quarterback is more the one that you need to have consistency, and I care about what you do every play and not just what you do on a given couple. So with Penix, those inaccuracies are born of a bad throwing motion. So if he was not injured, but he still had a bad throwing motion, I would still care about that. I would be a little bit more optimistic about his ability to fix that issue, and I would hope that it's not a flexibility in the knee thing or a flexibility in the hips thing, which you can't teach. Some guys are just stiffer, right? You can drill it and you can try to work it out as much as possible, but some guys just throw stiff, and he might throw stiff. But when his arm, wings out to the side, when he, leaves his feet on, he almost jumps sometimes on his deep throws. All that stuff's really bad and still needs to be fixed. And it's still an older prospect that needs to fix stuff. That's a big concern to me. So he would go from a guy that I say is, top 50 to a guy that I say is, top 40. It wouldn't affect things very much. Big Vikings Wolves guy says, do the new defensive additions like Van Ginkel, Cashman, Grenard, and Griffin give Flores the defensive identity he was searching for last season? Is the defensive identity rotating between a whole bunch of no names like the old Patriots defenses did? Because that's kind of what we're doing here. It's flexibility, right? I think there is a difference between like the kind of edge rusher Danielle Hunter is and the kind of edge rusher that like Grenard and Van Ginkel are, where they're going to be a little more comfortable dropping into coverage. They're more, 3-4-y. They're more, outside linebacker types. I don't know. I don't think that the 2023 Vikings defense suffered for identity at all. So it's a matter of if they can keep that identity and then make it more consistently successful. Scene Season asks, how good was Andre Carter tape? And should we believe in him to make the jump to edge 4 or even 3? Oh, Scene Season, buddy. I think it's too mean to use the word embarrassing, but there are some reps on that tape that are not good. Here's the thing about him, though. Last year for him was never supposed to be serious, and it was unserious. He got in a couple of times. He had some I'll call them funny reps. But the whole idea of him is that he needed a year to get out of military cardio shape, where in the Army, they will have you do more cardio and less like bulking, less weight training, basically. And so he would be like slimmed down. It's a totally different type of athlete that they're trying to look for in the military. And now that he is out of that world, he can sort of craft his body to be an NFL athlete, but that was never going to be something that happened in a couple of months. It was always going to take a year. So we've had a year. So now the expectation is, all right, now you got to be a dude. You don't have the excuse of, being a Devi project anymore. You're a guy that has to go like actively make the team. And that's going to be my question about him. If he ends up as edge 3, that's a phenomenal outcome, but I don't see it. And also I just like Patrick Jones a lot, so don't go too crazy there. Minnesota Sports Appreciator says, what is the worst number our new QB could wear? So shout outs to Dusty Baker, who tweeted the numbers that are available for a quarterback right now. And obviously number switches can happen if you wanted to, but here are the numbers that are unclaimed. We don't have a 1, we don't have a 2, we don't have an 8, a 17, or a 19 right now. Obviously, numbers like 10, not available, but those are the numbers we have. I think it depends on the guy, but for me, 8 and 17, for a quarterback, I don't think you can go wrong. I think those are just nice, solid numbers that fit most quarterback aesthetics pretty well. 1 and 2, you need to have a certain aura to you to be able to pull off, number 1. Like Justin Fields pulled off number 1. He's absolutely the kind of guy that wears number 1, right? And I think 2 has a similar kind of vibe where you need to be young and exciting to pull off number 2. 19 is the catastrophe for me. 19 is a bridge quarterback number. 19 loses a camp competition and gets traded for a 4th round pick in the middle of the season to, take over for someone injured. And 19 is not a good number for a quarterback to wear. I don't like the aesthetic at all. There's also some people asked if the quarterback could wear number 0. I don't remember the rules about that, but I don't think it works. You got to be like thick. You got to be like too big to be a quarterback to wear number 0 and like pull off quarterback. The person on the team that should wear 0 the most, after Ivan Pace, because that was his college number, but I like him in 40, is Ryan Wright. Ryan Wright should wear number 0, if we're being fully honest here. Viking King asks, how likely or unlikely that Darnold plays the whole year, irrespective of which QB we draft? The irrespective of which QB we draft makes this really hard, because the QB we draft has a lot to do with that. If it's a guy that's ready right away, maybe Sam Darnold doesn't play any. If I think Drake May needs a little bit of time to, get acclimated, or somebody like JJ McCarthy's a little younger. History tells us that a guy that with as much experience as JJ McCarthy has would need time to get acclimated. Then maybe it's the whole year. Maybe it's half the year. Maybe it's 6 weeks. It's a really difficult question to answer right now, not knowing the guy. It really depends on the thing you said, irrespective of it. Nolan M asks, I think I get why you asked that. I don't think that there's a set amount of weeks that's like, okay, this is too much Sam Darnold. It's truly up to what the guy needs. And we can't really know that. We will get to Nolan M's and the rest of your questions in just a bit. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. And boy, are we in a golden moment of sports right now? We got the Masters coming up. We've got the basketball tournaments. March Madness is now April Madness, but we're kind of in the end of that. So you can go gamble on Final Fours. You got draft props. You have basketball and hockey getting toward their playoffs, and baseball is just opened. It's a beautiful, beautiful time to go gamble on sports. If you want to get started, you can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet, whether it's a spread, a heavily favored money line, whatever it is. Win a $5 bet, get $200 that you can use to bet on anything else, the tourney, MLB, NBA, NHL, and everything else. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Wrapping up this Twitter Tuesday episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. Next one comes from Nolan M., who asks, how much of a need is RB2? Chandler seemed like a significant liability in pass pro last season. Given Jones's age and injury history, it seems like a bad idea to give him an even bigger workload than he had in GB. Super agree with the evaluations there. Ty Chandler did some really bad stuff in pass pro, which sucks. He was phenomenal at it in college, so he lost that mojo. This happens, right? Especially with day 3 guys. But I digress. Chandler, not good in pass pro. So you hope he gets better at that, right? That's probably an emphasis of his offseason, I would hope. And I agree that, with Aaron Jones, you probably don't want to give him 600 carries, right? As I read the comments of like Kevin O'Connell, as I try to read into that, they seem a little higher on Ty Chandler than that, and they might just go with him as RB2. So maybe they don't draft anybody at all. But maybe if they do draft somebody for competition, I'm always in for that, right? Competition is great. That's what day 3 picks are for. Then we can feel a little bit safer. But I guess in terms of like how big a need is it, like the way I interpret that question is what should they spend on it? And I would say day 3 pick. Yeah, that's something they've got, 2 4s, 2 5s, a 6, a 7, like one of those can be toward a running back. You also have year 2. See if you get something more out of Dwayne McBride this year. See if you can get something more out of Kenny Nwangwu, although I kind of doubt it. He's just a kick return guy, and that's okay. And maybe you get a step up in pass pro from Ty Chandler, and this isn't an issue at all. But, pile up those likelihoods and put yourself in a situation where only one of them has to hit. That's how you play the probabilities. 1991 Ford Tempo Enthusiast asks, assuming we draft a running back on day 3, would explosiveness or pass protection be a more important trait to look for? That's a great question. There's 3 things for me with running backs, and I don't think it changes from day 1 to day 3. These are the things I value. They are explosiveness, pass protection, and then vision. And vision is kind of a loaded word. Do you read out the plays properly? Do you know what you're looking at? What kind of, runs do you have experience in, that kind of thing? Can you find the hole? Can you hit it fast? Those are the 2 questions. And then I think pass protection is pretty important, especially for, guys that are going to make the team there. But as a day 3 running back, you're probably looking at special teams as well. So do you have that athletic profile? Are you going to make the team if you're running back 4? Like that's a big value thing in, day 3 picks. Are they going to be on the practice squad? Are they going to get cut and get claimed like Marcus Epps because they didn't play special teams for you? That pick could have worked out better if, they had a better reason to roster him his rookie year and not try to sneak him onto the practice squad. Ryan asks, what could we possibly be thinking at left guard? Assuming a trade up starting a third or lower rookie or any of the backups we have signed seems suspect. I agree with that. Right now, if they had to start camp tomorrow, they would have a competition between Dan Feeney, who is making less money than Blake Brandel, and Blake Brandel. Neither of these guys are making more than like $4 million. They're not even making enough to count toward the compensatory formula. They are not in the they're not making enough money to imply anointed starter, right? So right now it's a competition between those guys. A day 3 rookie probably joins in, and then you just see who wins the competition, which I kind of agree with you, Ryan. Feels inadequate, but only because just a few months ago, 9 months ago, they had a left guard worthy of an extension in the building, and they let him go for a 6th round pick. So if that 6th round pick is a guard, and then that guy has to go win a competition against Blake Brandel and Dan Feeney and does it, then Kwesi gets all the medals in the world. But otherwise, it kind of seems like they got cheaper and worse which is not the path to a Super Bowl. Getting worse is not the way to do it. Chris asks, what is a draft take that you had that you're proud of? What is a player or pick take you feel like you nailed? So I was thinking about this, and I don't really think that I can go anywhere 2022 and before, because before that, and this is just the story of my own growth, I had basically delegated my draft analysis to like draft guides. I said, I don't know nearly as much as a guy like Dane Brugler or Jordan Reed, or like these guys know more than me. I will defer to them and I'll just kind of couch their opinions. And I was open about that. But it definitely made my draft takes not really my draft takes, because I didn't really feel like I was intimidated by the college drafting prospects. I don't really know how to approach a thing with 350 players in it. How do you get a good take? And I think what I've kind of come to is I'll never be the guy that, watches 300 players and does a draft guide. That's just not how my brain approaches this. But if I pick one position and really hone in on it, or two positions last year, I picked my corners and my receivers, and I really honed it, and I did quarterbacks too, just in case. And I really honed in on those positions and totally ignored everything. I can't even tell you who the linemen were last year, but I can tell you a lot about Deonte Banks and Cam Smith and Addison, of course, and Zay Flowers and all these guys. So the answer to this question is going to be one from last year, which means I can't really take my lap on it yet. It's only been 1 year. But I think an inflection point for me where I realized, okay, I think I can approach this, is when I watched, one of the first corners I watched last year was Keely Ringo. And it was before he'd bombed the combine. So everybody was like, he's a first round pick. First round prospect, Keely Ringo. And I watched him and I was like, and I tried to, study up on corner, and I watch clinics. I talked to people that know corner and tried to kind of assemble a base of knowledge before I went in. And then I applied that base of knowledge to Keely Ringo, assuming that I was going to see a really good player. And I didn't. And I saw a guy that like really struggled with a couple of things that I had been taught to look for. And I was like, this guy kind of seems like a backup, maybe. Like, is this dude an NFL player? Sure enough, he goes in the 4th round. I'm pretty happy that the NFL kind of saw that the same way I did, and that I didn't need to wait for him to bomb the combine to get that take. I'm pretty happy with that. A lot of my takes from last year are off to a good start. I liked Jordan Addison. I did not like Quentin Johnston. I liked CJ Stroud. I was meh on Will Levis. Those all feel like they're on a pretty good track. Saying Will Levis is not a first round quarterback, and then he is not a first round quarterback, he falls out of the first round, felt a little bit like, okay, I'm at least in lockstep with the league on this, which feels like, you're always going to be in a decent spot if you're doing that. It's just that it takes so much effort for me to get to that place that I'll never be able to do it for 300 people. And hopefully I can, repeat that this year and with the people that I do get to, and hopefully it wasn't just that I got really lucky, which is absolutely a possibility. Jay asks, do you think that the Vikings were aware of the potential for the new kickoff rules? And if so, do you think that played a role in them signing Romo? Yeah. It was reported. It was public by then that this was like very likely to pass, this new kickoff thing. The people involved that are voting on it are like they just ask Ziggy Wilf what he's going to vote for, right? Like what's the vibe you're getting, right? So they got a really easy in onto that. But it was kind of, you could tell which way the wind was blowing by free agency, that the kickoff rule was going to be updated like this. And yeah, getting a guy out of the XFL. I mean, would they have done it anyways? Maybe, because an XFL kicker and like somebody who's got a little bit of pro experience, but clearly isn't going to come with any cost at all, is, I think, the ideal place for a kicker, because I don't think that kicker quality outside of like specifically Justin Tucker is sustainable. Everybody has their fall from grace. So you might as well just minimize what you spend on it and cycle through them. That's always been my philosophy on kickers. Last one comes from Skull and Crossbones, who says, I'm trying to learn how to evaluate prospects on my own. I started with QBs and I'm struggling with the complexity of the position. Is there a good entry-level position that would be better to start with? So I'll answer your question, but I don't know if you should give up. But if you're looking for a very simple position, I think the simplest one on the field is running back to watch from the bird's eye, at least in my opinion. You do have to learn run games, and run games are pretty complicated. I think run plays have more moving parts in them than pass plays do. 5 routes versus 7, 8 blocking things, and there can be combos and there can be differences. What are the fronts and all that stuff? So you kind of have to learn the basics of how a running back sees it. But if you know how a running back reads zone, you know how a running back reads with a puller, which is follow the puller, and you know how a running back reads duo. If you know those 3, which there's actually an episode from last May of this show that goes over exactly that. It's like how to scout running backs or something like that. And if you know those 3, you will be able to pause a clip. And this is what I like to do with running backs. I'll pause it at the mesh point where he actually gets the ball. And I look, where are his eyes? So how far along is he in the read? And then, I got to know what the play is. So obviously you got to watch the play to see, like, is this counter or whatever. But once you know what the play is, you pause it at the mesh point and go, okay, what am I seeing? What would I read here if I could pause? And I don't have to do it as fast as a running back because I get to pause and be slow, and that's nice. But it makes it easier to come to a good answer, right? So you can usually get a sense for what the read should be. And then if you compare that to what the running back does, if he does something different, it's, for me, I very rarely just can't figure out what the running back was thinking. You can at least see what the vision was, and you can get a sense for it. Another one, if you want to go on my Patreon page and look at the Cam Akers versus Alexander Madison video that I did before Akers got hurt, you can see, I think it was right when they traded for Akers. You can see what I'm talking about there as well. So I got a couple things that can help you with running back, but don't give up on quarterback. I think for draft analysis, for trying to evaluate positions, do what speaks to you. If running back isn't interesting to you, it's going to be harder to get into, even if it's even if you don't have to worry about, like, what's the coverage and the leverage and the protection and, like, all the different things that go into QB. It's definitely the most complex position. But I think if it's interesting to you, I would say keep slogging through it. And you know what? You're going to be wrong a bunch. You're going to do that. So be bold and go be wrong with authority. That's, I think, the best way to learn. And be okay with yourself for being wrong, right? Be humble about it. Don't go tweeting out stuff that's going to get bookmarked and get you dunked on, because that feels bad. But try to be humble about your knowledge and about your ability. Like, even the takes I have the most conviction in, I will still absolutely readily give it a chance, like Michael Penix, right? And Penix isn't even the strongest take I have. I think Bo Nix is my QB6 right now. And if Bo Nix turns into the next Tom Brady, like, I'll give him every shot in the world to be that, right? And that's fine. This is only a hypothesis, is what I always say. This is not a conclusion. It's a hypothesis. And just keep that in mind. You'll be all right. All right, that's plenty. I will see you guys tomorrow. And as always, Skull.